All right, welcome into Pod to Win the Game. I am Charles Robinson here today with Charles McDonald. C-Mac, you're back in Brooklyn right now, correct?
Correct, I am.
You are, but you have seen the Ravens. I'm excited to talk to you about the Baltimore Ravens. I've since, let's see, the last podcast I've been through Cardinals, Niners, Broncos. So we're gonna try to pull all these together now. Did not win the $1.5 billion lottery. Made sure I bought a ticket. Didn't win it, sadly. And of course, it was someone in Florida who won it. Did you play? I need to know.
Yeah, I played. And I didn't win because I'm here on this podcast today. And I didn't immediately quit my job. So, no, I played. I did not win. And congrats to that lucky person in Florida because they're living my dream right now,
See, I think I would go in the opposite direction. To borrow the line from Bobby Axelrod in Billions, what's the point of having you money if you never say you? So I would show with my 1.5 billy, or I take the lump sum. Let's be honest. I take the 750 mil, and we would just literally go down a list. That's what I used to tell Therese. I was like, I have a list, and if I ever win the lottery, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be the greatest Twitter rant / podcast rant ever. We're on a leash on everybody. Everything I've kept inside, I'm going to go ahead and cut it loose. Someday it's going to happen.
I'm just going to disappear.
You're just going to vanish? That'll be
vanish. Yeah, I'll pop up back up in like 3 years when I'm broke and say, hey, can I have my job back?
Yeah, exactly. We'll probably go through 750 million. It's never enough, right? You're
never enough.
Would 750 million be enough? Like, I still feel like I need more. Hard Knocks finally debuted Tuesday night. We got to talk about that. I'm glad we're talking about it because you and I, we actually had differing opinions on Hard Knocks. I felt a little bit better about Hard Knocks than you did. I took it for the entertainment value that it is. I saw on Twitter, you're saying, where's the journalism? I think it's an entertaining concept that you continue to tune into Hard Knocks for the journalism of the show and not the entertainment.
They skipped over so damn much, though.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. First of all, we'll get to the Aaron Rodgers love letter that it was.
That's all it was.
You tell me first and foremost, what do you feel like they missed? Remember, this is episode 1, by the way. There are more episodes to come. What do you think needed to be addressed in episode 1 that wasn't?
If you're going to go that hard in all on the Rodgers love fest, and maybe I'm mistaken because I don't see when you would fit it again after this because the preseason games are going to start. You're going to get more into like the smaller camp storylines. How can you do this whole Rodgers love fest thing without really even talking about the events that led up to him being the quarterback of the New York Jets? Like, this is arguably the greatest quarterback of the past 20 years of football who did not shut the hell up for the past 3 years. And that partly led to him, being a part of this seismic trade that, shifts NFL history as we know it and puts the Jets back on the quarterback relevancy map for the first time that they haven't had since freaking Joe Namath was their quarterback. And we're talking about this guy like he's Jesus. We got an uncritical look. I don't remember which player it was. I think maybe it was one of the defensive linemen who was like, just a flat, Aaron Rodgers is not who people say he is on the internet. Well, what about who Aaron Rodgers says he is on the internet? He's been on Pat McAfee's show for the past year saying crazy every single week. We don't have to just like pretend that stuff didn't happen because it's all happy and sunshines now that he's here with the Jets. It's an integral part of his story, which makes it a part of the Jets story. And once you start moving past on the initial love letter, we already know the Jets players are excited about this. They were tweeting about this before he even got into the team. They were tweeting about this when he was flirting with Pat McAfee, with the Jets on the Pat McAfee show. That's not groundbreaking. It's not even remotely interesting to me. I want to know more about what he thinks about his comments in the past, the trade, how it led up to it. It was just such a fluff piece. I don't really see why I would need to tune into episode 2 because we couldn't even talk about, controversial stuff in episode 1 because we were too busy. Oh, wow, Aaron's here. We know that. What don't we know?
I think you expected a lot for one episode. I think
but we're not going to get what I expected in any other episode.
You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely not. I mean, so why expect it? I mean, remember, the teams determine what hits the cutting room floor in this, and this is going to be a critical dive into Aaron Rodgers. This was never going to be a critical dive. If anything, I think what Hard Knocks has become is it's about mood and atmosphere and entertainment. And, there are certain aspects of things that they didn't get into in episode 1 of, maybe where in the past they have family, people moving into camp, like all that stuff. But it's because they have this centerpiece. They finally have the ice sculpture in the middle of the party for everybody to stare at. And that is Aaron Rodgers. I think what they wanted was the dialogue of everyone commenting on what they thought about it, how good of a player he was. Let's show all the no-look passes, the fun that everybody's having.
You can watch it on YouTube.
Absolutely, you can watch it on YouTube, but that's the content that HBO is here to sell. They're not going to send you to YouTube. They're going to say, we're going to put Liev Schreiber over it with the voiceover, and we're going to put the music, and we're going to, build the drama however we feel like we can build the drama. And we'll give you the opening speech from Robert Saleh and the pained anecdote about the eagle and the crow and all this stuff. Sorry for spoilers of people. I mean, if you're listening,
that was a real bad one.
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad because it's got to be one of the worst. The 32 coaches have to come up with an intro speech to their team when they're kicking off camp, but the worst has to be the one for Hard Knocks because this is going to get televised. So it's always something that's probably overwrought, overdone, overthought, and often falls flat. Everyone's trying to get back to the Rex Ryan, now let's go have a damn, a damn snack speech. And I don't think that's ever going to be captured on Hard Knocks ever again. But look, I'll tell you what, I'll speed round it. Okay. I took notes. I never do this, but I took notes. And by the way, I want to point out something. No one has griped more about Rodgers on this show than me. Nobody. No one's had a bigger beef with how he portrays himself, what the multitude of ways he finds to play the victim role, all these different things. Now, that said, I would be lying if I told people I didn't think Rodgers was an entertaining person. I do think he's an entertaining person. Sometimes I think there's a time and a place for it, but I do think that when there's a show like this and it revolves around him, he's fascinating. He can be funny. He's clearly engaging with his teammates. So many of his teammates over these two franchises. Clearly, we're learning it about the Jets now, but over the years, he spent with the Packers. A lot of teammates gravitate toward him. You can kind of see why. But so speed round for me. The Saleh anecdote, I mean, right off the top, painful, as you said. I think it was interesting that Rodgers, literally the first shot you get of him, he walks out and he says, I'll give you some good today. He knows. This is the guy that plays to the camera. He knows how to play to the camera. I love the line because it showcases he knows exactly what he's doing. Always expect every single thing that comes out of his mouth is an example of how he knows what he's doing. I do think he's a great mic'd up guy, and I think that comes through the show. Quinnen Williams, I think it was funny where he said, shout out to Aaron Rodgers for coming in and helping us out. And then he kind of laughed. Quinnen Williams is going to be a guy that is clearly they're going to focus on at some point during the course of this show. I think it's great. People are going to get to learn his personality. I thought it was interesting when they showed the defense's reaction in the meeting to some of the things Rodgers was doing. Like they were like amped up, seeing some of the throws he can make. And I do think this is a great defense that will be made better by practicing against him on a regular basis. I think that's something that you got right away. I thought the cameos were awesome. Nick Van Exel out of nowhere was a crazy cameo. I don't know what Method Man is doing in his workout routine, but I definitely would like to buy that program, whatever it is, because he looks absolutely unreal, which was another great cameo on this one. I thought bringing in Liev Schreiber I thought it was fun. There are ways you could have screwed that up. I thought him being in camp, he's kind of dorky, and I think it came through.
Dorky is what I would come back to for a lot of it.
Yeah, there was a lot. Okay.
The Sex Panther jokes, the Austin Power jokes,
Liev Schreiber.
Okay,
That's
but
who
see,
he is
that
now.
stuff's corny as hell to me. I don't know. Like I was having one of those moments while I was watching. Like I kept looking at the bottom ticker to see how much time is left in the episode. I could not wait to get out of that when that was over. I don't see myself watching another one of these, to be honest with you.
Okay. The dorkiness definitely came through. And I will say, there were a couple of times where I checked to see how much time had passed because of the fact they were focusing like solely on Rodgers. And I'm like, man, we are through like almost, it feels like we're through almost the entire episode, and we've really never gotten away from just the absolute love affair honeymoon that's going on with this guy. Again, it's what I expected in episode 1. I thought it was interesting kind of hear Rodgers talk to Zach Wilson and sort of see how the two function. I think that's actually, if that's real, what we saw, I think it's going to work really well. It seems like Zach Wilson is, I don't want to say in awe of the guy, but clearly I feel like he appears to be approaching it from like, come on, man, like this is who it is. This is who I'm going to learn from. This guy has something to offer. And I think that's actually important. I think it's something the Jets wanted to accomplish. One thing Rodgers said, he actually did have a line that I liked a lot, that I thought was real and it was legitimate. And I wish more organizations and really socially we'd take this to heart. He said, don't always sit with the same group, where he talked about, in the team. And I do think that is one of the, over the years you cover teams and groups solidify inside franchises. And then you will hear it's hard for people who aren't in the offensive line group to penetrate that group and become close to some of those guys. And I think sometimes becomes a barrier, or the quarterback always hangs out with the offensive lineman and not really anybody else. The wide receiver group is always tight. And I do think functionally franchise, I think he's right. It would help a lot of franchises if guys intermingle a little, push themselves a little more to try and go into groups that they're not comfortable with. I liked kind of hearing him say that. I thought it was funny when he said, DeMarcus, we're going to sing national anthem. Like for a moment, he was us. Like, I think everyone had that, like, wait, is this going to happen? Like, people weren't aware that it was going to happen when it started. I think we were all Aaron Rodgers at that point. And I actually thought when I initially saw the cut-ups, I thought the longer version of it about the throw it up to Malik when he had the headset on, I was thankful that it was more of when we first saw that sort of drop before the episode ever came out, it was like, wait, like, is this dude calling offense? Like, is he like literally like playing an OC role at this point? In the longer version, it was clear he was like listening in, it's not like he wasn't basically doing Hackett's job. That was the one thing I was a little nervous about when I saw the drops, is I'm like, man, this is probably not going to be great for Nathaniel Hackett. If on this deep ball, it feels totally like an Aaron Rodgers call. It felt less like an Aaron Rodgers call when you watch the expanded version of it. So I understand your gripes. I do. I think if you take it from a sappy popcorn standpoint of they love this guy and they're going to jam that down your throats, you kind of get what you expect. I'll ask you this. Brian Gutekunst has got to be pissed, right? Like, the Packers GM has to watch this and just want to break everything in his office,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like, this is just got to piss you off.
I felt upset for him. It's weird for me because I can see how, like, if you're on Aaron Rodgers' team, how could you not be captivated by him just walking into the room? I mean, I heavily relate to, like, when Michael Carter, I think it was, or Garrett Wilson on the show was talking about, dude, like, I watched this guy growing up.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I felt the first time I walked into, like, the Giants locker room. I met Eli Manning. I was like, holy dude, like, I've been watching you since I was in elementary school, and now I'm here shaking your hand and talking to you. So, like, I get how that could be captivating to the point where you have nothing critical to say about the guy. But I think if you are going to try to make a documentary, you should try to present more sides of it. And that's, if I was the Packers, like, dude, that's crap that you're just going to talk up here like he's not an insanely controversial figure for multiple reasons over the past, let's call it 3 years. I know that that's not what the show is anymore. It's just, I don't really see why this is compelling or captivating TV or even interesting TV if I'm not a Jets fan. We already knew people were excited about him, but it would have been nice just to get like a 2% honest view on what happened with all the trade nonsense that dragged over 6 weeks and made us both want to quit our jobs back in April. It's just, I don't know. It was too much fluff for me. I was expecting some fluff, but for let's call it like 35 of the 52 minutes, it was just a Rodgers love affair.
Oh, I think you're being conservative there. I think it was more.
Yeah. and like, dude, the Liev Schreiber stuff. Okay. My Liev Schreiber opinion last night was, oh, damn, I didn't know Sabretooth was the damn narrator for Hard Knocks.
Really? You didn't know that?
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, I've never been curious on his voice. It just sounds like a movie narrator voice to me. So that was interesting. But then, I don't need the 5 minutes of, hey, go talk to Liev Schreiber. Who gives a get back to the football? Get back to what's actually interesting. And to me, it's just, the Jets' hands are all over it to a point where I don't know if you watched like the One Jets Drive stuff, but it just felt like an uncensored version of stuff that they already put out that's meant to make the team look good. So I don't know. I expect a little bit more. I want a little bit more from HBO. And I know that it's not all their fault, but I would like a little bit more if you're going to pretend like you have access like that.
If that's your expectation, that's fine. I just don't think HBO's in that business with Hard Knocks anymore. Maybe in-season Hard Knocks. Maybe. I
wouldn't dare watch in-season Hard Knocks. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I just don't think they're the critical vantage is the last thing. I feel like they already know they're a pain in the ass and that teams don't want to see them as it is. And so I think when they go in now, they're not going to do the Cleveland Browns over again. They're not going to do the, Hugh Jackson, Todd Haley, Freddie Kitchens awkward meeting that will forever probably be one of the greatest Hard Knocks scenes that never should have made it, but did and ended up being fascinating and lasting. Okay, we've given it enough time. That's episode 1. We're not going to do this where we're going to break it down constantly. We'll see how it plays out the rest of the way. We'll bring it up as it's notable. But I think for what it is, just pure entertainment value, whether you love or hate Rodgers, I think it's an interesting watch so far. And at least from the standpoint, if you want to be critical, it's going to offer you plenty of opportunities to be critical for the things that glosses over. Like the, Nathaniel Hackett, the whole Sean Payton thing barely gets mentioned. And I'm like, that was such a massive thing in that organization when it happened. And it pissed people off to a level where I know what Aaron Rodgers said to NFL Network was hardly the harshest words he had for that. I was really hoping we would get the mother F, Sean Payton from Aaron Rodgers. And I'm sure that happened and it didn't ultimately air. I want to swing it though, move on to some news. Jamar Chase said something. It was kind of interesting. When he was talking to media, he mentioned this idea. Now everyone's, rolling through camps and whatnot. So players are they kind of get caught in weird quotes. Now you have like Ron Rivera talking about Eric Bieniemy. Now he's apologized for basically saying like players are having a hard time with some of the stuff Eric Bieniemy's bringing to the table, just being too intense or whatever. But Chase, I felt like got caught in one of these moments where if he, basically he's talking about Joe Burrow, said he doesn't necessarily want to see him out there week 1. If he shows up after week 5 or shows up for week 5 and beyond or whatever, he would be fine. I think it raised some alarm bells because Zach Wilson and the Bengals haven't said how long this calf pull is going to keep Joe Burrow out. They've said weeks, but no one's expounded on it. When I read what Chase said, I thought, why is he saying this number? Like, is this like a number like in the organization? Is this a number that Burrow said to him? Did someone say he might miss the first month of the regular season? And that's why he, how he gets to this, 5th week idea. But I think he backtracked a little bit afterward and said, of course I'd love to see him out there. And he just, basically said, I want him to err on the side of caution. It is interesting though, that he just trots out that number. And remember the first 5 games, Cleveland, and this is what was weird about it. Cleveland, Baltimore, the Rams, Tennessee, and Arizona. I would just say up front, like Cleveland and Baltimore in your division, you don't want to miss in divisional games, right? Absolutely not. And by the way, Cleveland and Baltimore are going to put up a fight. Like you can say what you want about the Rams and how you feel about them, Tennessee, Arizona, fine. But Cleveland, Baltimore, that's an interdivisional rivalry. Those are both rivalry games. They're going to put up a fight. Yeah. Like that to me gives me pause that you would include that number and knowing that if it had all been cream puffs, if they had all been teams where you're just like, you're going to roll over these teams, fine, then I get it. But when I looked at the schedule, I'm like, those are some weird games for him to be missing. And does that mean that Burrow has maybe told Chase something about the severity of the injury that the rest of us don't know?
Yeah, I mean, week 5, you're right. That's very specific. And I mean, with the division they play in, that's tough because I know that me, sometimes in the analytic community and people who look at the numbers, like getting off to an 0-2 start can be difficult to recover from at times.
Yeah.
And I look, even if you're like, let's say that you drop off AZ, you get Burrow back in time for the AZ game. I mean, the Rams, they're still going to have Stafford and Kupp back, and you would assume at week 3 they're healthy. And then Tennessee, they still have one of the best defenses in the league. So if Burrow's not going to play for that, with Burrow, that's a pretty manageable first 4 games, I think. But without him, that turns into a slugfest pretty quick. So if he's going to miss the first month of the season, that's a pretty serious deal.
It's the teams, right, that were in that group. That's what, to me, I'm like, when I saw the quote, I'm like, well, I haven't seen their schedule. They must just play a bunch of nobodies, or teams that just are clearly rebuilding or decimated or whatever. And the second you see 1 and 2, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you? And then I'm like, okay, well, let me look at, 6 and beyond. 6 is Seattle. I mean, you can't tell me Seattle's better than Cleveland or Baltimore right now. You can't guarantee me that Seattle's going to be a tougher team than Baltimore or Cleveland. 7 is a bye, right? Then, okay, you get 49ers, Bills, but then like the Texans. It's just weird that he mentioned that number and it had those teams. And then, by the way, that he did backtrack pretty quickly. And I think it's because naturally when people looked at it, they're like, that just feels too specific. Is Joe Burrow going to miss a month of the regular season now? And maybe that's why the Bengals aren't saying, like, if this is insignificant, don't you feel like the Bengals have been like, hey, not a big deal. Like this is, but you can say, not a huge deal. He's going to miss some weeks. We're going to err on the side of caution. That's not really how they've necessarily handled it. They've been pretty secretive about the timetable. I'd be nervous. I'd be a little nervous if I was a Bengals fan that maybe Chase just said something that revealed an internal look that maybe the rest of us aren't getting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I think if you're a fan, you kind of forget like how hard it can be to make the playoffs when you burn a couple games early in the season. Because then, especially in a conference like the AFC, you might be asking Joe Burrow, like when you get back, like you kind of got to be perfect almost damn near the rest of the way if we're going to lock up, a playoff seeding that can not only win the AFC North, but also challenge Patrick Mahomes. And, what I assume will be another AFC West crown for him. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that plays out. I guess, you can also look at it since it's preseason, they're not really obliged to give us more info than, they need
maybe
to
it's
at
nothing,
this point.
right? Maybe it's nothing.
Maybe it's
it
nothing.
might be nothing.
But it could be something.
It's just in the analysis, it's weird that he put a number on it. And then it's weird that, and not only that, like if it's nothing, it's still kind of bulletin board material if you're like Cleveland or Baltimore. You're like, wait a minute. Like, we're your first 2 games. Yeah. Like, this is how little
versus the Baltimore defense.
I mean, this is how little, if I'm right, if you're John Harbaugh, aren't you standing up there going, hey, this is what they think of you? Like their best receiver, their elite receiver basically just said, we don't necessarily need our quarterback back for week 2. Like, even in the best case scenario, it might even be bulletin board material. So a little weird. All right, let's move on. I want to get to this Alvin Kamara suspension and sort of what's going on with Kareem Hunt right now. It's gotten pretty interesting. Obviously, Alvin Kamara gets suspended 3 games for his role in this fight in Las Vegas last year. Kamara pleaded no contest to a lesser charge in July. The league, obviously, after that plea, jumps in, does their work, and via the personal conduct policy, he gets suspended. Interesting for the Saints, clearly an important guy missing from the equation going into 2023. Team that I think could be pretty good, particularly offensively. Pretty weak. Let's be real. We still think the NFC South is a pretty weak division.
It's bad.
Right? Yeah, it's bad. So, it dings them, but I think what's kind of interesting is that Kareem Hunt works out there. All indications, and I was texting with somebody from the Saints, was that this was going to be like kind of cursory. Like he was going to work out, he had a good workout, and they were going to end up signing him. And then when I saw people reporting like, oh, he's going to, I was like, yeah, okay, he's clearly going there. All of a sudden, there's a left turn, and he goes to Indy to work out because now it appears that Indianapolis is going to need a running back because the Jonathan Taylor situation continues to get worse. This is as ugly as it could be. First, there's the back stuff. He's got a back injury. That's why he's not practicing. He goes on social media, basically shoots that down. Then it's an ankle injury that's tied to like this surgery that he had where this should have long been in the rearview mirror. Clearly, this looks like a hold-in, and now he's excused. He's got an excused absence from camp. Everything about the Jonathan Taylor situation screams he doesn't want to be there anymore. He's not going to practice while he's there. They don't want him now in the building if he's not going to practice, and they feel like this is becoming a negative focal point. So Taylor's stepping out of the building. I can't imagine him playing for the Colts at this stage. This feels like it's getting forced into a trade scenario. And now Hunt is working out for the Colts. Looking at an opportunity that A, might be a little more money, and B, might be a heck of a lot more opportunity than he initially expected. Maybe the Saints, maybe you get a three-game run without Kamara in there. Maybe with the Colts, you could get 300 carries this year for the Indianapolis Colts. A lot of drama that's lining up, I think, to me, this feels more like a Colts story than a Saints story, but interesting nonetheless that Kareem Hunt now, his market has heated up considerably between these two teams.
Dude, if I'm Kareem Hunt, I'm telling JT, Jonathan Taylor, bro, you don't want to play here.
Get your money, man.
Go on out of here. Come on.
You're getting a second lease at life here, yeah.
And look, as a Kareem Hunt fantasy owner who has held on to him tightly since we drafted a few months ago.
Oh God,
I need him in Indianapolis.
Right. Oh, okay.
But I mean, this is all. I don't really know how to describe the Colts situation by saying this is almost all Jim Irsay's fault. Like, no one told you to go out there and talk the way you did. I'm also a little confused as to why the Colts seem so. I know we're in the spot where the running back stuff has become like a pseudo labor battle within the NFL that's not actually ever going to get resolved until the next CBA. But I feel like the Colts are kind of one of those teams that could afford to pay Jonathan Taylor. You're not looking at a quarterback contract for Anthony Richardson potentially
right
until 4 or 5 years down the line, and by that point you could get through a whole Jonathan Taylor contract extension by the time you got to pay Anthony Richardson. And I feel sometimes we've gone a little bit too far in the other direction, because I personally still feel like having someone like Jonathan Taylor on your football team, if he's healthy, it changes the landscape of what you can do, what's possible for you. Especially if you're looking at having a quarterback that's as athletic as Anthony Richardson is. You think that you would have probably like the most athletic backfield in the NFL, and both of those guys are not like small guys. They're both about 240 pounds, and they can run away from defenses. So to me, like that extra math, it would have made sense to me. Like if the Colts were like, all right, well, yeah, we probably shouldn't extend a running back, but we are kind of one of the few teams that could afford to do so and see how it plays out, because we're in this position where we just drafted our franchise quarterback. So, I feel like that part's a little bit weird, but if they're not going to play ball with him, and they've, through Jim Irsay's statements that barely made any sense, if they've made it known that they're not going to play ball, then yeah, he should try to get out. And Kareem Hunt should definitely try to get into this situation for what we just said before. I mean, we've talked before about, I don't think the Colts are like, when you look at the sum of their parts, as bad as they played last year. You're kind of just a couple of guys getting back into form from being a team that can, kind of be a headache to play. So if I'm Kareem Hunt and I have the opportunity to get, let's call it 200 touches behind an offense that has Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and I'm going to get to play with a quarterback like where defenses also have to account for the run threat. To me, that's how you bounce back from having a banged up knee last year. I'm going to go to an easier situation where I'll still get the volume. And I'll hopefully be able to get my career back on track. But to me, like if you're the Colts, that's the same reason you keep Jonathan Taylor, just for let's call it like a 3-year contract. I don't know if that's actually as crippling as people make it say to be when the running back talent kind of matches up with something you need on offense.
Well, one thing about Hunt, if the folks inside Cleveland are telling the truth, they feel like he's lost a step, that he's not quite as fast as he used to be. And now the thing is, this would be an opportunity, especially if Taylor's out. He can kind of have that Mark Ingram, hey, I can extend my career for a number of years here. Maybe I can turn myself into a 10, 12-year running back in the league. Not necessarily a bell cow starter, but you make money and you stick around, and you know, that's more money into the pension, baby. And it's, again, it's paychecks. And you bring up the idea of like, can the Colts pay Jonathan Taylor? Well, you could really just argue they need to do this. Like it's not even about Ken, it's the need. And as you said, I mean, it's Richardson provokes the need, not Richardson being on a cheap contract, Richardson playing. Like you want the most talented pieces possible around him. And if it's a matter of getting Jonathan Taylor guaranteed money for 3 years, given the age that he's at, I think there's 3 years of run in Jonathan Taylor. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to start talking about, even if Richardson hits the ceiling, right? You're not talking about extending Richardson for 3 years, right? So you're not even having, if he hits all the markers and he's great after year 3, then that's when the extension talks, begin with Anthony Richardson. And guess what? If you've given Jonathan Taylor 3 years of guaranteed money, he is now an offloadable asset. He's so the window matches up perfectly, I think, between quarterback and running back. It's mind blowing to me. And like, I think it's, how much money are we talking about here? Like,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Like if Taylor is sitting there saying, I need $50 million in guaranteed money. Okay. That's going to be a problem. The running backs aren't getting $50 million in guaranteed money anymore. I just don't think that's going to be reality. If he's talking about 36, where basically you're talking about 3 years, 12 million a year, we're going to guarantee 3 years of salary, 3 years, 36 million. I would do that for Richardson. If you truly believe in Richardson the way everyone seems to, I mean, I don't want to be negative, but like, it's almost getting nauseating reading how guys are talking about him in camp, that we're just, I'm reading defenders just saying like, it's like humiliating trying to go up against him in practice. And I'm like, dude, this is so out of pocket, the hype that this guy has. And I hope it's real, but you better give him everything you can when the season starts. And having a running back who is a difference maker, who's still young, who can still carry a majority of that load. And by the way, who can pass block, who can be in there every single down you need him. Yeah, I think you pay him. Yeah, and I also think you're right. I'll say this, a couple of organizations I've gone through, without prompting, they've brought up the Indianapolis situation, and they've, without prompting, been like, thank God we don't have to deal with Jim Irsay. Like, Jim Irsay has created, like, it's seriously, like, it's just, it's the truth. It's teams that have problems, and I've gone through plenty at this point, are also approaching it from the vantage of, at least we don't have the owner on Twitter, out there saying this stuff. And when I was having this conversation with someone on a previous stop, I made the joke of like the episode of The Office where Ryan creates the fake blog for Creed because he says, I want to protect the world from Creed's thoughts.
Creedthoughts.blogspot.com.
Yeah. So it's like they need to create the Irsay thoughts.blog, or like they need to create the fake Jim Irsay blog and be like, that's Twitter, Jim, you're on. It's going out to the world. Like, maybe we need to be protected, and his team needs to be protected from Jim Irsay thoughts.
Okay, while you were talking, because this brings up an interesting point that one of my friends, Deontay Lee, he works for The Athletic, and Ben Solak, who works for The Ringer, they were talking about basically how the pendulum has, using the Jonathan Taylor situation, how the pendulum has kind of swung too far in the direction. So let's use like your contract for example. 3 years, $36 million, $12 million a year. That gets him on line with about what the Panthers are paying Dante Jackson to play cornerback. Like we're talking about closer to average, like above average NFL players, at other positions, in the average guard, in the average cornerback, something like
starting,
that.
like a solid starting corner, basically.
Right. So you're going to tell me like a top 3 running back that's going to get a ton of carries for a short amount of period isn't worth that? I don't know, because what I think what bothers me sometimes is the language that we use to talk about these running back contracts, as if it's something that will like cripple and kill your team. We just watched the Vikings get through a Dalvin Cook contract fine. They cut him at the end of it, but the dead cap, it wasn't a big deal, and he was productive and he got paid, and now he gets to go off and look for something else. It's just, I would just like someone to tell me, where does like paying Jonathan Taylor 3 years 36, 3 years 40, where does that cripple your team?
I think the 2 contracts that are the problems that people that really have kind of really pushed this along, and it's stuck in the minds of owners. It was what happened with Gurley with the Rams, and which was just it was a plummet. It was a cliff. Okay. Like once the injury set in, it was a total cliff with him, and a really bad situation that quickly escalated to being the worst contract in the NFL. And it was written about ad nauseum, worst contract in the NFL. The next guy after Gurley went out the door, that next worst contract was Zeke. And Zeke, it was different. They gave him the money, and then it wasn't the cliff, but it was a clear erosion from one year to the next, that he was not this explosive player he was the first basically 3 years in the league, what he could do. And so I think in the minds of teams, and especially owners, there's 2 things that come into play. One, it's what if there's an injury that occurs and it's either the Gurley cliff, or we just see an erosion where this player, we pay him, he gets hurt in year 1 of the deal, and then we're kind of saddled with a guy who turns into maybe a slightly above average running back. We've paid him what we think is elite running back money. And it kind of happens midway through year 1 or during year 1, then 2 and 3. And we feel saddled at that position. We've hurt ourselves. Or it's the Gurley situation where it's a catastrophic injury and he never really rebounds from it. So I think that's one. And I think number 2, it's that owners are listening to analytics people in their building. Analytics people are telling owners, here's the deal. Average out the numbers. When you throw a pass, when you take every pass thrown in the NFL and you average out the gain, it's 6 yards. When you average out every run in the NFL, you're gaining 3. Why would you devote money to something that is half as efficient as this other aspect of what you can do on offense? And oh, by the way, devote money to stopping that other thing that is supremely efficient, being the passing game. So, and by the way, corners, we rarely see corners suffer the kind of catastrophic injuries that change them into, corners. The erosion is more slight, especially for top end corners. But I would even say even like modestly good corners, we see them stick and last for 7-8 years. They can play at a pretty high level. So I think it's a mixture of both of those. And I will add a PS to this. I think we'd be lying if we thought that owners don't buck back when they feel like players are telling them how they should be paid. I still think that's a thing in the NFL. And I think if the running back group is like, you're f***ing us, we're meeting about it. And you know why I think that that's part of the ownership calculation? It's because Irsay mentioned the CBA without someone asking him about the CBA. And so I think owners are like, you're not, we bargained this, deal with it. It's just how the money and the mechanics of the game work now at this point.
And like I said before, the CBA, there's nothing you can really do about it. I just wish we would have a little bit more discernment on how valuable some of these top running backs can actually be for your team.
I think, look, here's my thing. I think I think the attitude will change if it shows out on the field with someone. There have to be a couple of teams that pay some guys. And you know what? Truthfully, it might be Christian McCaffrey with the Niners. I go through Niners camp and you're like, he looks really good. Like he looks
Yeah.
really, really good. When I went through, it was a Brock Purdy, and I'll get to this. It was a Brock Purdy rest day. So it was the two backups. It was Trey Lance and Sam Darnold were taking first team snaps. You know who I was like, that guy makes mediocre quarterbacks look better. It was McCaffrey. He looked fast, jumped out. Whenever he got the ball, you were like, oh my God, if this guy stays healthy, he's going to have one of these years from the running back position where we're like, wow, that really is a changing element in the game. I think if we get a couple of those, you'll get some teams and some owners that maybe start to look at paying the right guys they feel,
right,
the elite guys, a little bit more money. All right, let's throw it to ad break. We'll come back on the other side. I'm going to talk about quickly the stops that I've been through. All right, we're back. So let's talk about what we want to watch for this preseason. The first preseason games kick off tomorrow, so now we're going to get a chance to see a lot of these guys on the field. Remarkable, by the way, that a bad Hall of Fame game did like 6 million viewers. Football is just the most consumable product, I feel like, on the planet when it comes to sports. I want to run through real quick the camps that I went through. I went through 49ers, Broncos, and Cardinals. First and foremost, I mentioned the 49ers, talking about seeing McCaffrey. I was pissed when I got there because I'm like, oh my God, it's a Brock Purdy rest day. Like, I want to write a Brock Purdy story. I'm so dumb that I came on a scheduled rest day. But then when I started watching practice, I was like, actually, this is invaluable because we got two guys in Trey Lance and Sam Darnold that are going to take backup, or they're going to take first team snaps. They're backups taking first team snaps. And it's going to tell me something about Purdy that's actually probably as valuable as watching Purdy on the field that day. And I can tell you this, they're no threat. I don't think either player is a threat to be a starter for the 49ers this year. And I didn't think Lance or Darnold either of them looked particularly good when I was in practice. Now, this was a few days ago, but again, when you watch them take first team snaps against the first team but Bosa-less defense, I thought they were slow getting the ball out. I thought there were interceptions that were missed. There were interception opportunities that were missed. I think I saw people who were sort of accounting for the completions that day. And again, this is off the top of my head. I think it was like, oh, well, Lance was 8 for 12 and Darnold was 7 for 11 or whatever it was, 7 for 12. I think if you put a clock on these guys in the pocket, some of those completions were not completions. I'm standing there and I'm going sack, 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 hanging on the ball too long. You're not going to get 4.5 seconds in the NFL. It's not happening. And part of it, I want to be careful here because I know Kyle Shanahan has pushed Lance to stay in the pocket, play from the pocket. Let's work on that right now. That's where you want to make strides. But the completions, I thought, weren't particularly impressive. The best completion Lance had on the day through this deep one to Snead, that Snead literally had to reach around a defender with one arm, make an ungodly catch. And if you slow it down and you watch the ball, it goes behind the defender's back. And had the defender just turned his head, it's an easy interception. Or at the very least, a gimme pass breakup that could have gone off his helmet. I left that practice and I spent a little bit of time with Shanahan, and I was like, I understand why they're pushing in on Purdy, because I don't think either of these guys, I just don't see, again, we're in camp here, but I just don't see something there that would threaten Purdy. And I think they're going to have a hard time figuring out, frankly, who's going to be the backup at this point. There is absolutely a chance that Trey Lance ends up being the number 3 quarterback. There's no doubt in my mind. Darnold could as well. Either way, I wouldn't want either of those guys manning that team if Brock Purdy goes down. I'd be nervous about what that offense is going to look like with either of those guys at the helm, because I think at best their ceiling is mediocre.
I don't know. I think their whole quarterback situation is a red flag, because it's not like, Brock Purdy had a nice stretch, but I wouldn't call him like a cemented figure in the NFL yet. We still got to give it some more time. So, I think what we talked about with McCaffrey earlier is going to be pretty pertinent for them this year. I think even last year when he got traded, you kind of got to see ways that he could change the offense. And now a whole nother year of that, I think is going to be a big deal. But yeah, I mean, from everything that I've read and from what you're talking about, sounds like the Trey Lance experiment is DOA. and maybe you can beat out Sam Darnold for a backup spot. But to me, it makes me think about, damn, like how good could this team have been if they had spent those 3 first-round picks on players
Yeah,
that actually played,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Because Kyle has shown, you know, he if you give him a good quarterback like Matt Ryan, you can go out and tear the league down, but he just needs good enough. So you know, maybe well, I guess what I say is I wonder if this experiment and this, let's call it like the past 3 years of the 49ers has changed like how Kyle evaluates the quarterback or evaluates what he needs from the quarterback situation. And I think Brock Purdy this year is going to be fascinating because
Yeah.
if he's healthy enough, you should see a step. And the step
Well,
was already like they were one of the more sufficient offenses in the league when he was a quarterback.
that's the thing that's interesting about all this is that he was still in very, very early stages of development when he got hurt. Like just insanely early stages of development, which means if he comes back where he was, which is what Kyle said. I asked him, I said, what, what do you see now? He said, same thing I saw before. He's the same guy he was prior to going out with injury. Okay, well, in my mind, that means there's a hell of a lot of development still left. Like he's got a lot of work to do. And Kyle kind of said, well, look, he went through the offseason program this time. He didn't do that last year. It was a big deal. Like Kyle was like, we were like 6 weeks in by the time the rookie class came in. And so it's just like they're slamming it, trying to work, figure it out. And let's be honest, like Kyle wasn't spending a ton of time with Brock Purdy at that point. Kyle was focused elsewhere by the time Brock Purdy came in the door. He did say one thing I think was interesting, and well, two things. One, I'll get to this when the next draft comes, but he was sort of talking about quarterbacks. And I like, seriously, man, like, how does this continue to happen? How does any quarterback slip, let alone to the last pick in the draft, who can be a viable starter in the NFL? And he was just like, look, straight up, like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he was like, you have no idea what a guy's going to do until he gets on the actual field. He said, like, you can even through practice, and you can love him in college, you can love him on the whiteboard, you can love his IQ or, the processing that you feel like he has. You can get him out in practice, feel pretty good about it. But you're standing there when they go on the field for the first time in a live NFL game, and you're like, all right, now we're actually going to figure out whether or not this guy's going to get it or he's going to shit himself. One of the others going to happen. And I thought it was interesting kind of to hear him say that. And he told me that in February, he went back and he was looking at cut-ups of players for the 2023 draft. And he was like, screw it. He threw on the tape of Purdy against Clemson, his last game. He said, in hindsight, knowing what Purdy could do on the NFL level, having seen him in games, all of a sudden he was looking at Purdy and he's like, this guy's like a first or second round quarterback. We just clearly didn't see it, because you get lost in size and what he can't do and, what limitations are. And now it's easy to make that assessment now. We heard it for years with Tom. Well, geez, after he was a 6th round pick. But then when we went back and looked at the Michigan games, clearly this guy was much better. Well, in hindsight, of course, you have that. But it's going to be interesting to see, as you said, what Purdy's growth curve looks like when he gets back in there, because he's going to make mistakes. He's not going to be, by any means, a perfect player. He's very much a developmental player at this stage, playing on a tremendously talented team that eventually will get Nick Bosa back into camp. One other player that popped, and I'm going to move on, but I did think it was interesting. The Davis Price kid they took out of Louisiana State in the 3rd round last year. He had a couple runs. He had a couple runs where I was like, who is that? I was like, I don't know who that is, but I need to figure out who that is right away. Like he popped a couple of runs in practice that were pretty impressive. But all right, moving on. Want to get to you. You had a chance to go through, spend time with the Ravens. Good time. Wrote fantastic pieces of content coming out there, especially about the offense. What was your biggest take? Everyone's fascinated about I don't want to say the rebuild around Lamar, but definitely the reload. I mean, these players, especially the wide receivers that have been added to that equation. J.K. Dobbins feels like a hold-in now. You went through there. You talked to a multitude of people. Is this going to be, I guess, are they just going to reach the potential, I think, of the pieces that they've added on offense around Lamar?
With the caveat that people stay healthy. This is going to be such a drastic shift, just like from what the Ravens offense looked like over the past couple of years to what they're trying to do now. So, I there was a lot of, disagreement among the fan base, I think, with how they viewed the job that Greg Roman did. And I think you can argue about like his the play calling sometimes, maybe when he's choosing to run certain things, when he's not. But I think one thing that's like indisputable is, to a degree, like he was handicapped by what was available to him. Whether in terms of missing on draft picks, trading away draft picks like Hollywood Brown, guys being hurt like Rashad Bateman. And then when you start losing guys like that, guys who are supposed to be your top wide receivers, it just becomes, to me, like a frank math equation. Like, how can we get our best 11 players on the field? And for them, it was tight ends and running backs. We all know that Mark Andrews, one of the few elite tight ends in the league. They drafted another kid last year, Isaiah Likely, who had a strong rookie year in the 4th round. And when you look at the formations they were using, they were like the leaders in terms of 22 and 21 personnel, which is basically like going to be your heavy sets on the field, which makes sense. I mean, you got Lamar Jackson, you got Greg Roman, that's kind of his thing. But if you're going to pay Lamar Jackson, $260 million, at some point, you have to start protecting your investment. And I think the best way to do that is kind of what they've done, where you pull away. We're not going to be as heavy, put Lamar in situations where he's running into, 8, 9-man boxes and taking those hits that we don't need. We'll spread it out. We'll add Odell Beckham, Zay Flowers. Right. Hopefully we can get Rashad Bateman back. And now you can start looking more like a modern offense. So if you go back and look at some of their stats from last year, like Lamar Jackson, he threw, I think, less than 80, or had not threw less, but had like less than 80 plays in 11 personnel last year, where you only have one running back and one tight end on the field.
It's insane.
It's insane. Like it's
11 personnel is the number one. I mean, for most teams, it's the number one package on offense.
Right. And I think for the Ravens in total last year, they had less than 200 plays in 11 personnel, which to me, it's so drastic that's like, you got to do something to fix it, because that's just the way football's going. So you add Odell, you add Zay, and you get Todd Monken, who's had success like in the past, kind of just adapting to what he has. If you go back to Georgia, they ran a lot of 12 personnel, but you got Brock Bowers, you got Darnell Washington. Of course, you're going to run a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets. You go back to when he was in Tampa Bay, they were like an 80% 11 personnel team, because you have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Adam Humphries, who was a solid third receiver at the time. I think it's an exciting, like, if you're just a fan of electric football, and if he's moving as well as he looked like he was moving at camp, and he can stay healthy throughout the whole season, it's just gonna look markedly different. We'll see if the results are different, but like on face value of what they're trying to accomplish, it's just a totally different offense.
Is Lamar healthy though? I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, like, how does he look? Does he look explosive? Does he look healthy?
Oh yeah, he looks big, dude. Like,
I mean, I thought he looked big last year.
yeah, but like he looks like he's been eating, like he's in shape. I think he looks good. It was also kind of tough to judge because, one, it was early in training camp practices, so usually like the defense will have an edge because especially when you're bringing guys back, like you're bringing defensive coordinator back. They have a lot of the same cast from last year. There's a lot of continuity on that side of the ball. And it's a really good defense. I mean, they were kind of whipping the offense's butts throughout a couple of practices. But then I remember, like, we're talking Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphrey. Like, these are dudes that they have on defense. So I don't really know if that's a real slight. And I've read, in the past couple of days since I left, that the offense has kind of picked up its pace. So I think that tracks to what you normally hear from a training camp. But it's exciting to me because they have finally like invested in Lamar's success as a thrower. I think with or his ability as a thrower with the offensive coordinator and the receiver hires. So I think that's one of the biggest stories in preseason, just to see like what that offense looks like. Because I don't think it's going to be as much, we're going to line up with 50 guys in the line of scrimmage and just bang your head in and see if we can score that way. We're going to try to air it out a little bit more.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I watched a lot of Zay Flowers, cut ups, and reminds me a lot of Steve Smith.
Yeah,
he just
Lamar's already called him the joystick.
The joystick. Yeah, I mean, he looks to me like he just, Steve Smith. It was like he fought every route. Like he would fight you. Like DBs had to suck to go up against Steve Smith because he beat the hell out of you over the course of the game. And a lot of what I saw, from Zay going into the draft, it felt like he was engaging and beating up a lot of defenders, particularly at the line of scrimmage. Just looked fast. I mean, just so many things about, despite the, it was like the Smurf class of wide receivers, but he was one of those ones where you're like, he doesn't play small at all. And he looks really explosive. So very excited to see how that all looks. And I'm a big proponent of every quarterback in the league showing out, and the league is, I think, exponentially better when Lamar is healthy and playing at, that is the guy I want to watch every single time. If he's playing at his peak level and not banged up in the offenses. And again, this was the old offense. Even when that offense was running well, I was like, I want to see this guy on the field. So definitely looking forward to that. Went through Broncos camp. We can go back to the fireworks and all the Sean Payton stuff, rip it on Hackett and just do the opposite, worst coaching job of in NFL history last year, all this different stuff. We could do that, or I could just tell you what I saw when I was there that I thought was really interesting was decisiveness. I think you could see a guy who has run an NFL program for a lot of years, knows exactly what he wants to do, walked in and was like, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to talk to players. Here's the expectations we're going to have. Here's where the media is going to be. He moved the media across the field. Like, I sent you a picture. I'm like, we're on Mars covering this practice now. Put up this sign. I think it was like Competition Way or whatever near the podium, which was kind of corny. But what I actually thought was most interesting, I was talking to someone else in the building, and they were like, do you know how many padded practices we've had? And I was like, no, they were in pads when I was there. I think he was like, I think it's been like 7 so far, and you can only have like 16. And like Sean had basically burned through half of all the padded practices he could have in the first 2 weeks of camp. And I'm like, damn, he's like he's just beating these guys. Like, he's grinding them right now early with the padded practices. McGlinchey did get rolled up on when I was there, and it looks like it's going to be a couple of weeks. That's the one thing with the injuries. Talked about Tim Patrick. They've had injuries already, and you're like, man, I hope this doesn't go back to the way it was last year, where they just wholesale lost so many guys over the course of the season. I think defensively they can be pretty good. Offensively, we'll see. Can Sean get Russell Wilson to play? I think if he even gets him to like 90% of what Russ was over the course of his career in Seattle, they should be a pretty good offensive team. They have a ton of talent, and they should have a really, really good defense. The Sanders kid that they took at linebacker, he's probably going to be if not a all pro level player, he's going to be a Pro Bowl level player. I mean,
he was one of the few linebackers we're drafting last year. He was,
yeah. And did we put him? Oh, we didn't.
I think so.
We didn't put him on our
team. We
punted
on the.
Yeah, we punted on we punted on linebackers for the all juice team. However, I know we had a conversation about him before we decided to punt on linebackers. Well, I will tell you, he looks fantastic in their camp. So we'll see, man. Like, Sean has put the structure in. When you talk to people in personnel, they will tell you that when they watch the practice tape of Russ, he looks better. He hit Mims, their 3rd round pick, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma. He hit Mims on a deep one when I was there that reminded me a little bit of like Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett. It was a moment where I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember when he was hitting passes like that. And also I think him slimmed down means something. Like, people in Seattle who didn't have a lot of great things to say about Russ, someone made the point where they're like, they saw him physically. They saw he had slimmed down. They're like, you know what? That's a really good sign. They're like, because it shows that he has pride, that Russ just went through the worst season probably ever in the history of his football career. Probably not feeling great about it. And it's like, you know what? I got to do something here to respond to everything that happened last year. And the physical change he made is probably a byproduct of that.
Yeah. I mean, there were moments last year towards the end of the season where it looked like, Russ had something left in the tank. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has a bounce back season. I think if as much as it pains me to say this as a Falcons fan, if there's anyone that can get that season out of him, it's probably Sean Payton. So I'm interested to see what happens this year. And I think, outside of the Raiders, I think this could be like the AFC West that we were hoping for last year.
Peyton, real quick too, I forgot to mention, the day before I got there, Peyton says, preseason games, we're not going to see the we saw before. and I did enjoy this. It just made me laugh because he goes through this list where he's like, your uniforms aren't coming off after you're done. That's not happening. There's not going to be sunglasses. You're not even wearing sunglasses on the sidelines. He says, you're not going to do interviews during the game. And I like this one because it shows his age. He said, there's not going to be any Gilligan hats. On the sideline.
Gilligan hats.
Meaning bucket hats, but he called them Gilligan hats. Gilligan hasn't been on. I mean, I guess reruns are still on, but you got to strain to find reruns. Gilligan's Island has been on, I think, 4 decades. It's been forever.
What's wrong with a bucket hat, though? I don't get that.
He's not having it. Okay, so none of the it's business. This is business. No screwing off. I think it's. Part of me wonders if there's certainly an element here of he comes in, constrains everything, and then over time you loosen a little bit. It's a lot easier to constrain everything at the start and loosen as you go than it is to come in loose. And then down the line, you're going, oh, okay, now we're going to stop all this behavior, or how these expectations later. So I did think that was kind of funny.
I don't think that I can be convinced that Sean is truly passionate about bucket hats on the sideline. But I think this is his way of asserting. But I mean, actually, it is Sean, so maybe it is. Maybe he is.
It's interesting. It's interesting. It's an interesting when you compare kind of Sean and everything he's been mixed up in.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Be a degenerate. It's okay.
All right, let's do Cardinals. We'll get out of here. Went through Cardinals camp. I mean, it was sort of wanted to meet with Jonathan Gannon, the head coach there, wanted to meet with Monty Ossenfort, the general manager, obviously taking over there. Jonathan Gannon says the F word more than I do, which is insane. I've never heard anybody where they needed to be edited more than I did when it comes to obscenities. But yeah, it's not going to be a popular opinion. And I know that Cardinals fans are probably going to hate this, but there's a little bit of an element. It's not close to a one for one, but in terms of some of the energy and how he wants to connect with his players, he reminds me a very little, but a little of when I remember Mike Tomlin taking over the Steelers. He was a younger guy. Why wouldn't
Cardinals fans want to hear that?
Well, because I don't think they like Gannon at this point. Well, I don't want to say they don't like Gannon, but it wasn't a popular hire. It was when he was hired, it was sort of oh God, what are we doing? Who is this guy? He has an energy to him that I think that players respond to. And I was talking to him. We're kind of in the guts of the stadium. We're sitting there. We're on a golf cart, and every dude who went by, I'm watching him kind of interact with these guys as they're walking by, and just sort of how it just, there was something, this vibe that reminded me of when Mike Tomlin first took over the Steelers, and I would watch him walk through the locker room, with regularity, kind of watch how he talked to players on the field. And again, it's a defensive mind. It's someone that I think they're going to push the defensive build. Obviously, everyone wants to ask about Kyler. I get that. I think from what Gannon relayed to me, he's throwing his weight behind Kyler right now. There's a clean slate there. He expects everybody to be on board with Kyler when Kyler comes back in and starts. Ossenfort, Monty Ossenfort, same situation. Clean slate. We're moving forward with this guy, but we're going to expect to see growth. We're going to measure this situation. We're behind it now. Let's see how this goes. I wouldn't say that they're absolutely invested in keeping Kyler, but I also would say that these people that are well, they're going to take Caleb Williams if they have the first pick in the draft. I put brakes on that right now. Let's wait and see. I do think they're going to give him an accurate measurement. I just wonder if it's sort of when I went through Raiders camp last year and I heard we're going to give Derek Carr an accurate measurement, and I was kind of this is probably not going to go well. I almost wonder if that's sort of the same situation that's going to ultimately unfold here. It's going to be a build with this Cardinals. People are going to have to be patient. It's going to be a build here, and they're going to have to resolve what they do at quarterback. But I I liked Gannon. I thought, his sort of his demeanor and how he approaches players, and he had 3 years as a personnel man earlier in his career. I think that helps him a lot with Austin Fort, having been on an evaluator side for a number of years early in his career, and also a coaching side. It's like flow. I always like that about Brian Flores, the fact that he was an evaluator at one point in his career. I think it's always good for head coaches. So
for our second office bit of the day, I will say I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious. The Cardinals, I don't know. I kind of think that especially I was impressed with how the Cardinals handled the draft. Mm-hmm. You pick up, getting that Texans pick is huge because they could still be terrible this year. Even if things are looking in the right direction, they could still be awful. I like the way they work the draft, but I don't know. They're still the Cardinals. Prove me wrong. I mean, they've had good things going for them before, and it all crumbles so damn fast.
I'll tell you what, though, about Paris Johnson.
He's a real deal.
Starting right tackle out of the gate. Like, I think you watch him. He's like, there was this idea of like, maybe we'll play him at guard, to start him off, and then we'll move him, we'll slide him to tackle. I don't even think you have to. I think you start him at tackle immediately, and then you can kind of figure out who else you want to move around. I think that's going to be a really good pick for them.
Yeah, I forgot for a second. Like, who the hell is their left tackle? DJ Humphries. He's gotten paid a lot of money with no claim or criticism whatsoever in all his career. Just been kind of hanging out. I don't know if he's good or bad, but I know he's gotten paid a lot of money over there to play left tackle for the Cardinals.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, Humphries isn't. He's not going anywhere. He's going to be the left tackle. And,
he's got that career that I would love to have. No one talks about you ever. You made a whole lot of money. It's fine.
Yeah, but I can tell you, being in Phoenix when it's like 120 degrees out.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes you're like, why does the city exist? Like, what are we doing here? What was the point of creating this? All right, we'll get out of here. What last thing in Cardinals that was kind of interesting too, though, is like the Cliff Kingsbury stuff. Like, some of the stuff, it was definitely looser, and there was a lot more leanings into, like, I don't want to say millennial type behavior, but there was sort of an understanding and an embrace of that this younger generation you can't handle them the same way maybe you handled other generation. I don't know. Jonathan Gannon to me seems like he's handling them like this is. Ain't gonna be no more social media breaks with the phones and meetings, and you better show up on time, and you're going to be wearing team gear around the building. And like, it feels a lot more regimented, like a real football operation, versus the things that people really liked early on about Cliff have kind of fallen, to the wayside. So, all right, that's it. Sort of a long show. Sorry about that. Tried to get all of our visits in on this one, but we'll be back next Wednesday. Looking forward to that. You can get me on Twitter at Charles Robinson. You can get CMAC at 4Verts. You can get Stone Rochelle, our ace producer, at SJ Rochelle. And as always, helps keep Therese Paylor's legacy alive. Visit breakingtea.com/Therese. That's a capital T in Breaking Tea for the all juice tea or hoodie. You can also support the Therese Paylor Scholarship at Howard University, as well as at Mizzou directly, if you check out our podcast description. Remember, it's fantasy season. Check out the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show with our guy Matt Harmon to get ready for your draft this season. It's coming up fast. And as always, please leave a 5-star review. Tell a friend. Help us grow the family. We would appreciate it. And we will see you next Wednesday. Peace.